for coming. My name is Charlie Kleeman, as you probably saw. I am numbered among adjunct faculty here at Del Valle. I have been teaching in the Landscape Architecture and Environmental Science department, which has had a number of different names over the years, but I've been doing that for about 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And prior to that, I had a full and robust and enjoyable and traumatic and all kinds of adjectives to describe the career that I had with the Environmental Protection Agency in their regional office in Philadelphia. Now I'm retired from that. I've been working on repurposing my life here at Del Valle, and I've had a great time doing that. Being around students, sharing what I know, talking with people, making friends. So that brings us to here, and we're in this conference. We're kicking this conference off. And I have brought along a couple of friends from EPA to talk to you. So I'm not going to hog the podium here, so to speak, for very long. But I want to say this. One of the reasons that we're here is because as we look at the purpose of the Precarious Alliance Conference, its namesake is an alliance. And the alliance is this relationship between us, people, and the environment in which we live. We are in an alliance with the environment. And that alliance is precarious at best. And we, as representatives of people, 7 billion, 7.3 or 7.4 billion people worldwide now, we're part of that. And part of us, some of us, have done rather badly in our stewardship of the environment. Some of these things that we've done badly were deliberate, by people who didn't care, who were out to make a buck. They just didn't care. They had some waste to get rid of or something. Some of it was done out of ignorance. Some of it was done by accident. And one of the reasons why our sessions this morning, now and the following session in this room, with my friends from EPA, Jose Redmond and Miles Bartos, is because we're at the front end of this conference. And at the front end of the conference, we want to set the stage a little bit with how bad it can get, how bad it did get in some places around the country with respect to our stewardship of the land. And contrast that with some of the things that EPA has been doing and is still doing to remedy some of those problems and restore the land. So these folks, Miles Bartos is an on-scene coordinator. Jose Redmond is a remedial project manager. They both work in the Philadelphia office of EPA. And in their respective jobs, they do emergency response and remediation work for EPA. Taking what was really badly done and trying to bring it back to a more healthy condition. On Friday of this week, if you're here or you can come back in the morning session, over in the auditorium, we will have some people also from EPA and from the states and from the private sector who do brownfields work. Brownfield work, turning marginally contaminated land back into marketable land and putting it back to good use, turning brownfields into green fields, which I'm also moderating. That said, I'm going to turn this over to Miles, who's going to basically give you an overview of kind of soup to nuts, stem to stern, on how it's been in the environment and with respect to the work that EPA has done. Miles, take it away. And I'm going to click the slideshow for him.
Hi, I'm Miles Martis. I'm with the government and I'm here to help. Thank you. We started it off right. Hopefully you guys will realize that I like to have humor in my life. I'm certainly not as refined as some of the folks that spoke this morning. I'm also a real person. I'm shouting down this. Me, I'm a resident, I'm a person, I'm a working man. Yes, I have a great job. I enjoy my job. So, as Charlie had said, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm going to do something that's actually enjoyable for me. I'm going to turn the tables. I'm going to ask you to just quickly go around the room and give me just first name and what you do or what your interest is in this, whether you're in environmental cleanup, whether you're in education, whether you're whatever. That way I understand the audience, and hopefully I won't just be standing out here talking at you, because show of hands how many people like those sort of presentations. Didn't think so. So we can start up here.
My name is Tori. I work for Water Quality in Montgomery County.
And what do you do? Oh, stay in school. It's good.
I'm Marion Young. I own a company, Bright Fields Incorporated in Wilmington, Delaware, and we do cleanup of brownfield properties.
You're on the agenda to speak too,
I'm
aren't
going to
you?
speak on Friday.
Okay, I saw that.
Thanks, Randall, from the Blackfeet Tribal Business Council in Browning, Montana.
John Murray, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Blackfeet Tribe.
I'm Bill Mason, retired, and just interested in all of your programs.
Don't rub that retirement thing in. I have 16 years, 11 months, 3 days, and 7 hours, 4 minutes.
Mary Curley, no fracking in Stokes in North Carolina.
Kyle Dalton, no fracking in Stokes, North Carolina.
Hey, you worked no fracking in Stokes in North Carolina.
Carolina.
Retired.
Welcome
We
to
thought
Pennsylvania.
we were retired. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in North Carolina. If you come to the session after this, you'll hear about the Duke coal ash spill.
Oh,
that
yes,
was
we plan to attend that.
involved there. Okay.
We've got a coal ash dam right next to us.
Well, then hopefully it'll be a good one for you.
I'm Jim Searing from Solbury Township here in Pennsylvania. I'm a township supervisor, kind of on the town council. And part of my interest is that we have a beautiful township, a lot of preserved land, and an oil depot that still is haunting us.
Tuscarora Oil.
Yes.
I'm very familiar.
It just came up again, like told about it. 20 plus years of
Yes.
wonderful history, yes.
It's about the time
Yeah.
of year and season when it does come up.
Yep.
Lynn Alexander, retired graphic designer and author of the Marcellus Fracking Report.
I'm Jeff Sands, retired biology professor from Lehigh University.
Good university. Not as good as Del Valle. Okay, well, so really, like Charlie said, what I want to do today is kind of give you a little bit of a history of how we came about with some laws, how we respond, talk about some critical things, not only what we can do, what we're required to do, what we can't do, who's responsible for what, give some examples of sites that we have cleaned up. I can tell you right off the bat that I've missed more than I've covered, and I chose some specific circumstances that may be of interest, but I could go on for hours, and I would encourage you to jump in at any point. If you have a question about something specific, at the end, hopefully we'll have some questions can answer. I will also tell you that there are probably questions, and I say this as a human who loves my job, there are certain things that are above my pay grade that I can't answer. Probably with some fracking questions I won't be able to answer. I will do my best. But certain things I just can't do, and I'll try to stay away from that. I want to stick with facts and what we did, what worked, what didn't work, where we have problems, where we might not have problems. So, environmental contamination. Can you guys just, this is part of it also, audience participation is great. It's like revenge. When I was in school, I sat in the back and I always got picked on because I was just quiet, sitting in the back. Name some common things that you say are sources of pollution. Come up with a handful. You don't have to raise your hand, you can just say it.
Petroleum spills.
Petroleum spills, excellent, that's a big one. Those ones are really obvious. You see it, it gets news coverage, it's all over the place when it happens, whether it be pipeline, whether it be tanker trucks, whether it be rail, whether it be from a facility. Anything else?
Coal ash.
Coal ash, a good one, you get the extra, you get a pencil. So I don't know if you know, we have this thing in the government now called ICS, it's Incident Command System. It's this big structure basically is to manage a response. You have separation of span of control issues. You have one person doing operations, one person doing finance, one person doing planning. You have a bunch of different jobs. And very often what we find is that it becomes this laborsome issue where you have this huge management structure for something simple, and it really becomes, did you do the paperwork to do what you need to do? Usually, in my little sarcastic, with my wit, not sarcasm, I say, I'm not going to fill out a form to take this bucket of water and put it on this fire over here. So if you look on your pencil, you'll see a little phrase that says forms over function. And that's my gift to you today. So you guys got a couple of them. I don't know, no, energy pollution and coal. Certainly oil spills. You have leaking landfills, the underground tanks, production plants. That one goes across the board. Like everyone's putting emissions out, whether it's a big production facility or a little one. They all have emission control systems, but they have rail accidents, highway accidents, cars, trucks, whatever. What about these not so obvious ones though? Can you give me a couple that may not be super apparent to you?
Runoff from agricultural operations.
Very good one. Think of something even closer to home, something that may, again, not be obvious.
That roads.
Roads. Think about it in your own house.
Household chemicals.
There you go. Go ahead and click on that. This is actually probably. So what's under your kitchen sink? All right, what's under your kitchen sink is just as nasty as half the stuff that's out there. Actually, I alluded to this with some of the coal ash stuff. There's stuff under the kitchen sink that's more immediately hazardous to you, which is very important, or the environment, than that's out in a lot of these other spills that happen. The difference is the size of volume. Okay, home heating. You know, we hear big chemical companies. You hear dioxin, right? You hear fossil fuels burning. What about when you burn oil at home, or you burn even natural gas, or you burn wood? You're creating all sort of particulate, and you don't have any emission controls on your home wood burning stove. Now, I'm not saying don't burn wood. I'm not saying don't burn oil. I'm not saying it's all honky-dory. Part of my goal today is to bring some perspective in to what's going on in the world and how our environment does get soiled. Do you have a question?
Cosmetics,
Cosmetics,
sunblock, okay?
yes.
I was involved in water and waste treatment. The elements in sunblock cannot be removed from the water, but they're pumped back in the ocean.
Right.
So we have,
And everyone uses
protecting yourself this way and killing yourself the other.
And that's balls going down in Temple of Doom, I think, rolling down. You can't stop that ball. All you can do, or stone, all you can do is hope to slow it and make wise choices so it has less effect. The big ones are the easy ones to, the big oil spills, the big coal ash spills, the big toxic sludge. That's the media term, toxic sludge, doom and gloom. Go ahead and a couple of the other ones. Cigarettes. You don't think about that in environmental pollution, but there's dioxin when you smoke cigarettes. Yeah, they're very, very small, but every time someone smokes, there's a release into the environment. There's particulate. Hopefully no one here is a smoker. And if they are, I apologize. But if you smoke, I see more people take the cigarette and go, rather than put it in a proper receptacle. That's contributing. You think about how many people are smoking, how many things go on. That actually is a sizable contribution to environmental pollution. A couple more. Schools. I don't think of schools, education.
Schools.
Yeah, education in schools. I've responded to half a dozen mercury spills that were in houses because schools had mercury. Probably, everyone here is really young, but you probably remember hearing your parents, the old people, talk about in school playing with mercury. Oh, the school, it's like goes across and flies. Mercury's nasty stuff, and it costs a lot of money. It probably costs, I haven't done the math, but the amount for a little vial, like a lipstick tube worth of mercury, you can spend $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 to clean up a home. Now compare that with that amount of oil that spills. That's a lot of money per volume. You don't think about it. It's in many schools. I won't say most because a lot of them now have cleanup programs that have cleaned it out, but it's very prevalent in a lot of schools, especially lower income school districts where they can't properly dispose of it.
Science labs.
Science labs mostly, right? Batteries. Everyone uses batteries, right? for a variety of things. Not most, but many, even if just some people toss their batteries out rather than try to properly recycle them. What about the effort it takes to get those materials? That's mining. Causes all sorts of problems. I wasn't planning on talking about it today, but everyone heard about the Gold King mine, EPA's involvement with that. I was out there, and that's a mining. You've got acid mine draining, you've got metals being picked up because of the acidic water running down the river. You have to mine to get batteries. So and again, these are these little bit of unknown consequences. Like, we think it's great for using batteries or even electric cars, but you also have some sort of environmental impact. Even with something that's good, you have an impact. Again, my goal here is to try to give a little perspective and understand maybe something you didn't think of before. And I talk with my hands a lot. I'm part Polish, believe it or not. So mind you. And Italian. So 6 degrees of separation, I kind of already hit on that. You know, a lot of the industries, or a lot of the things that we want and utilize every day, the cosmetics, you don't think about what the chemicals are going into or where it's going. The making of the cars that you have, or even the electric cars, there's a big environmental footprint that's there, usually in the shadows. That's not necessarily, especially nowadays and age, we have a very, rightfully so, we have this effort moving towards green stuff. Great, amen. Like if I could, yes.
Oh, when you're finished.
So we're moving this. You know, if I could go, I'd get rid of my oil burner. I'm fortunate enough to live on enough land that I can't get natural gas in. I'd love to do everything by solar. I'd love to do all this great stuff. You have these choices. I only have so much money to do. So what do we do? We try to make better choices to minimize the impact.
Our toxic dumping laws are really strange because we are told that this is not across the board.
Mm-hmm.
To dump, we can't dump within state. Now they're trying to change that. So you've got a gas station down the street and they clean that land out and they take it to Ohio. Ohio cleans their gas stations out and they take their dump to PA. So who's fooling who? And we're really not aware of what's in our own home because we keep shifting it around.
We very much
lose the paper trail.
with everything. Well, I wouldn't say we lose paper trail because it's
No,
very.
it's there.
It's there. Sometimes it's very difficult because government, of course, we don't do anything easy, right? You have to have 25 forms there to get that pencil.
Exactly.
And I paid it out with my own money, so I didn't even use government stuff. It becomes challenging. It's an imperfect system. There's no doubt about it. Next one. So what do these sources affect? This is a toss-up. I'm gonna blast these a little bit. Air, water, soil. It's pretty easy. These are things that all these sorts of contamination affects these in some way. How much it affects it, that's what the question is. Big or small, they do have an impact, and we can deal with them appropriately, and we should deal with them appropriately. But again, it goes back to those choices. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to pay for? Kind of off topic, but if you remember when we had Hurricane Katrina, everyone was upset because the levees weren't built enough. And think about, we're approaching silly season. Actually, we're probably in the middle of silly season right now with politicians. And silly season, election season. I call it silly season.
We call it that, too.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. So I'll sit over here, right? When I talk over here, you don't have any apples, right?
Very simple.
We have a lot of talking, and imagine if someone prior to Katrina, a politician said, we need $1 million to reinforce this. That costs money. No one's willing to do that ahead of time, and then after the fact, we should have spent it. But if you were trying to propose it, first of all, I don't think it would go through. And second of all, he or she wouldn't get elected because it costs money, you're going to raise taxes. So again, that's the challenge, to find that median, like what's, I hate using the term acceptable, but really is what are you willing to accept and how do you protect yourself in the environment the best. So how do we ensure the protection of the environment? Well, that sounds pretty easy, right? How do you keep your car from breaking down? Right? You can do all the maintenance you want, you can change your tires, you can change spark plugs, and one day it doesn't start. We do equipment testing on our stuff routinely. satellite dishes for remote response. We have internet, we have phone for this. Worked great 7 days in a row. The next day, push the button. What the? It won't work. So the best you can do is come up with, you see, you've been there before with your car, right? Like great car, you get it back and it doesn't, all of a sudden the next day it doesn't work. So the best thing you can do, you ask a bunch of questions. Who's gonna do it? How are you gonna do it? What standards are you gonna use? How clean is clean? What about background stuff? How do you deal with if it's hazardous or not? What affects you may not affect me as far as irritants. What authority? Who's authorized to do this? And then under what circumstances it is. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, give you some examples, and we have a little bit of a quiz you're gonna have to try to pass. So we'll go back. Really, here it comes down to how do we ensure, where does it start? Please don't laugh and don't throw anything at me. But it starts with law, regulation, and wisdom from our elected officials. And I realized that, no one laughed at that. Wisdom, and did anyone see the typo in here? Because normally, no, you're not gonna laugh at my joke here. Normally I would say these aren't elected officials, they're our elected children. Because they don't really act like children generally react to stuff, they don't think ahead. Next slide. And usually it's reactive and it requires someone else to do something, just like with children. Yeah, that's why I say with children. No offense, of course. It's an imperfect system, right? We have an event, there's a bunch of scrambling, there's a bunch of fist pounding on the table, this is what we must do, and then something comes out of it. Sometimes I actually get it right. And in the case of environmental, at least, especially in the beginning, I think they really did. Their first national contingency plan was in 1968, and off the coast of England there was a tanker spill, the Torrey Canyon. That got officials in the United States saying, hey, we need to come up with a way to respond, come up with a format, a structure, some authorities, some plans, just like your plan on your car. I'm gonna get maintenance every, rotate tires every 5,000 miles, change oil every 2,000 miles, change spark plugs, all according to the plan. I know I'm gonna have this person do it because they're certified and they're trained at the dealer. You have this great plan to try to respond to it. Again, it's not perfect, but at least it was a plan. And it was, of course, prior to the red tape machine. That's when we actually got stuff done for the greater good. Next slide. So, 1972, there was the Clean Water Act. Now, I'm not going to read through all of these. I'm going to highlight a couple of key factors, because there's actually an evolution of regulation here that prompted agency interaction and gave authorities and requirements of various groups within those agencies. But basically, I missed that last one, that's right. Navigable waterways, adjoining shorelines and navigable waterways, and point source discharges. That's what the Clean Water Act dealt with. Also, it was surface water, not groundwater. Key distinction was missing. Again, imperfect, but it's a start. Also talks about the EPA or Coast Guard on-scene coordinators, that's me, and that we shall direct actions to remove a spill that provide or is a substantial threat to public health or welfare of the environment. And they should be in accordance with the NCP. So the NCP gives a bunch of basic rules and regulations you must follow. We're supposed to direct them and be in compliance with those basic standards. It doesn't say you need this size dump truck or this size water treatment plant. It just talks about general rules that you have to follow. Next slide. In 1970, in the 70s, there's even more awareness of some of these environmental dangers. Basically, 3 sites, Love Canal in New York, basically canal that, I forget the company before accidental. What's that? Hooker Chemical. They dumped a bunch of stuff basically in the canal in the town. Then I think it went to the school board, and then they did some digging, and it released a bunch of chemicals. It was really, really nasty. You have Valley of the Drums down in Kentucky, basically a valley full of drums. There's not regulated, just a ton. There's some photos coming up. And then Times Beach, down in Missouri, is this town that got hit by a depression. They basically had contamination from dioxin. This come from some oils they're putting in to keep dust down. there was flooding, evacuated the town, basically dozed it, moved the town. It's a ghost town now, basically. Actually, the good story is it's now a state park. It's reused, so it kind of goes back into the brownfields. You had something that was bad, you don't know if it's incompatible, you don't know what's off-gassing, what's leaching, what's mixing, what's reacting. And of course, this is the Times Beach sign right along the road. So, after that, in 1980, CERCLA is born. Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. This is a game changer. It did a lot of things. Basically, it classified hazardous substance, or it gave us the legal authority to respond to hazardous substance. Excuse me. So, there is a listing in the NCP. If anyone gets tired, you can read this, 40 CFR Part 300. And 302.4, it's got a list of hazardous substances. Okay, that's all the chemicals that are listed that we can respond to. We can also do pollutants or contaminants. One of my colleagues who's actually going to be retiring at the end of the month after 37 years of being in the government, he said you could, if you write the action memo right and show that there's a threat to human health, you can clean dog poop off a sidewalk. You got to get it past the lawyers. If it's over a certain threshold, you've got to be able to get someone else to sign it for a dollar value, but you can. That can be considered a pollutant or contaminant. Hazardous substance, as I said, that's a key thing for us. It also did 3 different things. Removal actions, which is what I deal with. There's 3 types of removal actions. There's an emergency response. Right now, something's burning, going out and putting a Band-Aid on it. You have a time critical where you don't need to run out the door right now, but it's going to happen pretty quick. You're going to go out and you're going to address it in some way. And then non-time critical. Those are usually a longer term. That might be some groundwater issues. That might be some dredging of a river. And then, of course, you have remedial actions. And Jose is actually in a remedial program. And I don't know if you want to give a synopsis of what remedial does.
Morning, everybody. My name is Jose Redmond. I'm a remedial project manager at Region 3. And I think the best way to describe this is the difference between our programs. You guys remember the program MASH in the 70s? These guys are the MASH unit. Right? They go out in the field, they do what they have to do, and get the patient stabilized or heal the patient. If it's a little bit more complicated case, then I'm the guy who's down in Tokyo hospital, gets the patient after they took care of it. I think that's the easiest way to describe it.
Actually, I like that better than the firefighter. And then, of course, it gives us the ability to do enforcement actions. We can make whoever did the polluting, we can order them to clean it up. There's a bunch of different mechanisms. I'm not going to go into all detail right now. So removal action is the biggest one. Much of what I talk about today is going to be from my perspective because we deal with removal actions. So it's going to be the shorter term, more MASH unit style, get in there, get the Band-Aid on, may not be the end-all fix, but it's going to get it prepped and stabilized to minimize the threat to human health and the environment. It also required the amendment of the NCP. That's, again, our Bible, what we call it. Gives you a bunch of how to prioritize. Potentially responsible parties, PRPs, you'll see that. Create the trust fund, basically help pay for it. Next slide. Encourages participation of states and tribal governments, opportunity for community involvement. We definitely don't want to operate in a vacuum. That's why we do public meetings, we do outreach, we do planning with the community. Try to use scientific and technological and return sites of productive use, which is key. That's kind of what we're talking about all here. If you have something that's really nasty, you want to bring it back. You can say, hey, this happened, it was bad in the past, but how do we get it back to something useful for the future? Yeah, that's the highlight. You'll see I do these blinking just to highlight points. A lot of these are going to, hopefully you're going to remember from a couple slides back when I get a couple slides forward, and a lot of this stuff kind of comes together. 1990 had the Oil Pollution Act, An amended the Clean Water Act from 1972, created a preventive liability and compensation regime, deal with specific vessels. Basically, it broadened our authorities. We found where there was weak points. The industry, of course, found where there was loopholes where you could get out of it, like any good lawyer or any big company would. Gave a contingency plan, we have area plans, we have, believe it or not, before Homeland Security, which is the most recent big government agency out there, we did a lot of planning with locals, with right down to the specific townships, to counties, EMAs, emergency management agencies, to the state agencies, responders, to local businesses. We have what's called LEPCs, or emergency planning committees, where we'll meet on a routine basis, and you meet with all the responders. So that way, when you're going to, if something does happen at, whether it be XYZ chemical company, or whether it be at the oil facility, or whether it just be a truck going down 81 that has whatever chemical on it, and it has a wreck, when we show up on site, we're not introducing for the first time. You know me, if you need the resources of the federal government, obviously we try to keep it local, we try to keep the responsible party, hold them to the fire to make sure they do it. But it basically gives penalties, research, liabilities, again, financial responsibility for the RPs. Next slide.
You have a question out there?
Oh, sorry.
Now that Homeland Security's in play, who does it?
We still do it. They just have a much bigger campaign. That's as politely as I can put it. They have the good thing I'll say about them is they did bring a lot of money to the table, especially early on. Maybe not good for the country because it kind of helped, you know, with our debt, but there's a lot of other issues. But they still get caught, in my opinion, if you ask me Miles, they still kind of get caught up in, we're going to come, we're going to give a presentation, rah, 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 we're DHS, we're going to coordinate everyone, and then they're out the door and no one remembers their name. And that's coming from me, who has been at the meeting when they've done presentations, and I have to find their card to remember who gave the presentation. Where if I go to, I do a lot of my work in South Central Virginia, so Roanoke down to the North Carolina border, Charlottesville, all those areas. Beautiful area, I love it down there. The state loves us being there. They have a strong response program, but they work with us. So I know Brian Thurman, I know Tommy Crozier with State DM, I know Beth Loman with DEQ. You know all the people, I know the fire marshals. So we have that relationship. If you were to go, I bet $1 to a coffee or $10, whatever you want to bet, that they probably won't remember who was the DHS guy that gave them. Again, they brought a lot of money, they gave a lot of grants, they gave a lot of stuff to the locals, which is all good. It's all great. And they do the planning, at least on the paper. I don't think they're at that point where they have the relationships yet, the historical relationships, which will change when I retire, and again, there's 13 years and 11 months, and not that I'm counting. Someone new will come in and I'll have to kind of start it up again. So the NCP, yes sir, it gives us a lot. It gives a lot of authorities. It basically describes how we're going to respond to that infrastructure. This speaks to basically my everyday job. And if you haven't noticed yet, I really do love my job. It's great. And I have a lot of things that it says the OSC shall, that's things I'm required to do. OSC may, things I have discretion to do, which also often becomes problematic when you're dealing with the public who wants you to do something, and sometimes it's exactly opposite what you shall do, or something you may do, but you're like, that's not what needs to be done. Next slide. OSCs and RPMs, that's us. We both operate under the NCP, or circle. Again, more little authorities, it's that structure again. I know I keep repeating this, but this is something that's in place and we're bound by these rules. Me in my younger, wilder days, like yesterday, when someone of authority or someone in the government comes in and they say, you gotta do this, my response is, hey, you work for me, I pay your salary. And while that sounds great, makes you feel real good, very often there's rules we've gotta follow. So that's some of the challenges that we have. We have a lot of authorities, but there's certain rules that we have to live by. This guy ain't going to jail. That's the bottom line. I kind of like it outside. Next slide. Same thing. This 300.322 shall direct, authorize to determine The cleanup, all the same stuff again. I just really want to drive that point home for these types of environmental cleanups that we do. Next slide. There's a bunch of other laws you may have heard of. RCRA talks about a variety of things, but it's basically storage of hazardous waste. Subtitle C, Subtitle D, basically general landfills and hazardous landfills, requirements that they have to be built to. Toxic substances, or TSCA, primarily it's the big thing people think about is PCBs. Everyone knows about PCBs, also deals with asbestos. These SARA, or Superfund amendments, more money, a couple more amendments in it. Small business liability and relief from Brownfield Revitalization Act also really ties in. You can hit the button again, that's going to go blink red. The Brownfields, that's basically bringing money in, not only with federal programs, but also with the states. And Friday, I suspect they'll talk a lot more in detail about that. Basically, how you can bring an old industrial site, something that doesn't, maybe it was cleaned up by us, but not too pristine, just take that Band-Aid again, bring it back into use and make it a park, make it a movie theater, or a business complex. What is an OSC? We've kind of already talked about this. I like to highlight it because I don't know if I mentioned, I really do like my job. It's great, it's challenging, you get to deal with a lot of different things. We deal with hazmat, we deal with oil, and we do deal with, here's the first quiz. What was the third thing I talked about? I could clean up something from a sidewalk. Pollutant or, dog poop, which is a pollutant or contaminant, okay?
Have broad powers.
Yes. So basically what we are, again, for hazmat oil and pollutant or contaminant, we're a safety net. We can be the bad cop when the local polluter or business is ignoring the locality. We're jack of all trades, master of none. We'll go from mercury from one side to oil to suspected buried drums to an air release, like with the state, regional hazmat teams, counties, townships, cities, the public, the RPs, fire marshals, emergency management, local politicos, pretty much anyone that has a say. We might have some information. We're kind of greedy at times, actually. We want to reach out and get that information from people because we don't know it all. Okay, so as far as cleaning up, there's some other programs that actually will do cleanup. You have voluntary remediation programs or voluntary cleanup programs, depending which state you're in, where the state can enter an agreement with a developer, say, hey, clean up to this standard to do this. I'm not going to go too much into it. Generally, we stay out of that. Brownfields, of course, big on this conference, which often ties into the VRP programs. I know in Virginia, it's one point of contact. Meade Anderson is the guy that does both. So you can do a cleanup, enter in brownfield, so it becomes a greenfield. Great, warm and fuzzy story, right? And has a site cleanup fund. A lot of the states do actually have some fund, much like we have in the Superfund, to actually go out and hire a contractor to do a cleanup. So by the way, we don't do actually the cleanup, all our contractors do. They are the ones that sling the shovels. We just write the check and justify the check. So over the next dozen slides or so, I'm going to talk about a bunch of different site-specific, scenario-specific scenarios where we did a cleanup, and hopefully you'll have some aha moments or just something to generate questions. So I definitely want questions. Hopefully you guys can get something out of me talking up here today. So the first one, the big obvious one, and you'll see a bunch of these are actually really the very obvious ones. That first slide I talked about, I was like, where the environmental contamination, we'd say, petroleum spills, we had chemical spills. Some of these are the really high profile ones. They're the easiest, low hanging fruit. I can reach up and grab them. They carry a bunch of things: crude oil, refined oil, natural gas, hazardous chemicals. When something goes bad, it can go bad, really bad. Next slide. You wonder where the pipelines are. I'm sure everyone's seen one of this. Goes through backyards, goes across roads. It's Keely.
Yeah, 1 block from
One block, yeah. So that's
It goes through my backyard.
right away, yeah.
Yeah. One street over from Keeler.
This pipeline goes right through Dulles County.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're everywhere. I would not encourage you to go online and try to look at the maps of where pipelines are across the country. They're everywhere. If you decide to dig, it is dial, it's 811, right, or 411 for digging. Miss Utility, you can Google it before you dig, because you don't want to hit one of these, because these are some things that happen. They blow out, and they have various sizes of pipe. You can be smaller 8-inch pipe up to 30, 48-inch pipelines. It's a lot of material in there. Can cause a lot of damage really fast. Next slide, these are just a couple. Pico or Pepco, this was in probably 2000, before I was at EPA. I was just a consultant EPA contractor. Pipeline spill, you can see the oil in the bay there, or in the harbor. Next slide. Again, a couple more overflight photos. Pretty nasty, a bunch of boom along the shoreline trying to catch it. Here's some just general metrics of what the size of the pipeline is. And just to give you a little interesting factoid, at least to me, maybe not to you guys. But we have this thing called the National Response Center. When a spill occurs, the responsible party is supposed to call in and give some key information, who they are, where it happened, what the volume, what the contaminant is. All these numbers, you can take at least one, sometimes as many as 3 zeros off of them for what the initial call came in on. No matter what, it's always, oh, we think 1,000 gallons or 1,000 barrels, and you always know it's going to be way bigger. And one of the examples that I have actually illustrates that. Enbridge Pipeline, happened out in Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan. They make great beer there, and now of course, when I'm on the spot, I can't remember the name of it. Great town, 30-inch pipeline was carrying crude oil, ruptured. Right? They're doing it. They actually had to shut down. They recharged it, and then they noticed a pressure drop. Of course, they reported 19,500 barrels, 42 gallons a barrel. Anyone do the math? How many gallons is that? A bunch. 819,000 gallons. 819,000. So that's a lot of oil in marshland. Okay, so think about marshland. It's not really easy to get to, right? So just by going in to get the oil, you're doing damage because you've got to track across a bunch of land. So now, not only, and this actually a lot of times comes in the decision of where to clean, how much to clean. Everyone wants to clean 0. But sometimes to get that 5 gallons of oil, wherever it may have gone up onto a stream bank. Oh, did I mention, by the way, this is at a, next slide. It was at a 50-year flood when this happened. So the river was high. Oil floats, right? So it's up the stream banks. And like bathtub ring, when it dropped down, now you have a ring of oil. So you have to make a lot of decisions. Everyone sees the oil's bad, right? It's on a stream bank. Like, oh no, that's horrible. Well, sometimes to go and get that oil, you're clear cutting trees to get to that oil. That, in many cases, could naturally attenuate if it didn't have a lot of oil. Obviously, puddles of oil you want to go. But there is a decision process to make of what impact you're going to have to clean it up. The answer, obviously, is prevent the pipeline release in the beginning. Go back that one slide. There's a couple other key metrics. 80 miles of shoreline. Talmadge Creek is where it happened. There's 2 miles of Talmadge Creek, and then 38 miles of Kalamazoo. Now there's 2 stream banks, so that's 80 miles of shoreline needed to be assessed and potentially cleaned. Plus catch all the oil that was right in the middle, turned it black. Agricultural area parks, oxbows, which are these, just like it sounds like an oxbow in a river. 2.5 million per week we spent. Now, the fortunate thing is, because this is an OPA response, we had it was actually, there's 1 and 2. If you come to my presentation later, Duke Energy, they were actually, I would say 1 and 1A for absolute best responsible parties out there. They're still a big bad chemical company or oil company, but as far as their level of resources, not flinching when you said, bring this and 10 more of them off the bat. Unbelievable what you don't want it to happen in the first place, but these are the guys that you want out there.
Duke Energy?
Duke Energy too. Duke was, I wish I told their president or vice president, who is the IC for them out there. I never want to work with you again, but I'm glad you were here for this. And of course, that's tongue in cheek, because you know, for us, our work is when there's a bad disaster. So we don't want a disaster, but we want work. So I'd rather not have had it happen, but their response is what you would want to have happen. So here's just some eye candy photos. This is some of the oil contaminated soils from the marsh that they pulled out. Just black and bumpy, nasty stuff. They, you know, looks bad, smells even worse. They broke it into divisions. This goes back to ICS again. You break into units, functional units, so you can properly manage. Like managing departments at a bank. You have, you know, one person dealing with tellers, one person dealing with loans or whatever. So this very first part, Division B, it's just Talmadge Creek. This is the marsh area. This is B's Talmadge Creek, that 2 miles of creek that got messed up. You can see all the equipment. You can see all the pads. It's still, oh, excuse me, near marshland. See how to build roads to get in. There's a 6x6 or 8x6, 8x8 ties. We do sometimes for 500 yards to get access to where you clean the dirt out. And of course, you see in the middle picture there, it's where they have a dam. It's an underflow, and they're trying to collect oil, let the water pass through, and basically manage the whole situation. Am I in your way? I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Next slide. So this is the next kind of section. For the most part, the same. You have the oxbows, you have submerged oil. This became an issue out there, actually. Some of the oil, even though you think it's going to float, some of the oil got dumped down and buried under the sediments, and you had submerged oil. So when you would disturb it, whether it be low flow events and you had a boat coming across, we had someone going out fishing waders, it's go into the sediment, and they kick oil, and you see a boop, glob oil float back up. So you can imagine in 3 years from then, when someone actually went in that spot, kick up oil, no problem. So created an event where we had the Submerged Oil Task Force. Sounds really like, you know, go Green Berets going after this oil. And literally going and sticking with an aerator in a coordinated fashion down the whole stinking river to try to find these pockets of oil. Incredibly labor intensive. Again, the answer is try to prevent this in the first place. Now, the nice thing is, just by doing that, you're also potentially disturbing, because I can guarantee, wherever this happens, there is an endangered species there. So there's some sort of toad or tadpole or purple warbler or some sort of animal, some sort of critter that's endangered. Now you go through a whole evaluation of like, oh my goodness, so what are we going to do? Is it worse than to stay in the oil, or worse for them to get sucked up the vacuum pulling the oil out? What do? You're not going to make everyone happy, I can guarantee that. Next slide. Rail incidents. These are some of the ones that scare me the most. And ironically, it's not crude oil. Everyone hears about Bakken, you know, Bakken. I think it's a political term. It's still oil. We still have an ability to respond to it. It's oil. If it's on the water or near and out of the waterway, we have the authority to respond. What bothers me more, chlorine. Yes?
The barking oil is highly flammable.
It is flammable. It does have some issues with some benzene. Toxicity, volumes. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying chlorine actually bothers me more because of its acute toxicity. You have an explosion hazard, you could have that with regular oil, you could have that with gasoline, you could have that with a car. You have with a rail car or a car going down the road with chlorine. Or if you had HF, hydrofluoric acid, that's some really nasty stuff. Again, I'm not minimizing anything, bringing it in perspective. You had a chlorine tank explode in the center of town, people are going to die because it's just going to expand, people inhale it, and you're dying. All right, so this is a little bit different. This kind of goes back into the discussion about how things get contaminated, and are they actually contaminated, and how do you clean them up, how do you get someone to do it. Abandoned facilities, if you look at these, can you tell me which one of these are environmental threat? Which one's contaminated and which one's a threat? potentially are a threat. But you don't know unless you get data. Now, the one I'd say I'd probably look at first is the upper left, because there's drums there. What's in the drums? Who knows? It could be water. You don't know. It might not. A lot of times I'll get calls from people, this NRC hotline, you get called, there's a company stacking drums out back. Do you know what's in them? And a lot of times the funny thing is I've been to that company already, and they are empty drums, or they're shipments of new drums coming in. Visually, it can be misleading. I'm not saying it always is, but this is a concern. This causes angst in the community, causes angst for developers coming in like, oh my gosh, what's here? I'm not gonna buy that, because that could be a liability for me. Remember we talked about CERCLA, being able to get authority to recover costs? That can scare people. This kind of leads into the brownfields program, where you can do assessments on these. And sometimes this is after we've cleaned it up. It still looks bad. We're not, painting it. We're not polishing it TURD. We're doing basic cleanup, stabilization to minimize the threat. Then the next company or next people can come in and actually do the final cleanup. So next slide. I already talked about this. Neighbors worried, property values can drop. Sometimes they're real problems. Sometimes it's a matter of perception. So education is key here to really understand. This is going to start becoming more of a common topic for me, and through the presentation about just the perceived. This is a big one happening in the region. There's actually a pretty cool story. It was the first site that I actually went to. I did not do it. I was a younger OSC, and my mentor though, Mike Toll, he actually had this. He does this area planning in Delaware. This is a chemical plant that basically was closing up their doors. They said, we're out, we're going. They had electrical bills owed, so the power's gonna be shut off. Next slide. They made chlorinated benzene chemicals. So for all the men in here, you ever know that smell of a urinal cake in the bathroom? That's chlorinated benzenes. That's what it is. So it smelled like a urinal cake in this whole facility. It was still running when we got there. All right. Basically,
What year are we talking?
this is 2002. That's when I got hired. 2002 it started, somewhere in between. They left 43 million pounds of chemicals. Now, this process created, not only had the chemicals on the ground, if you didn't have them heated, they'd freeze into a solid brick, which makes disposal almost impossible. When you process, you have a bunch of emissions that come out, even though they have emission control systems like all these companies do. I shouldn't say all. The big ones, they all have them. We can argue whether they're sufficient or not. In many cases, they're not. So basically what happened is Mike ran the company. So EPA became a producer of these chemicals. That sounds odd, right? Like, this is a chemical facility, we're gonna run it. But what that did is allow us to actually recycle the chemicals. Rather than go to a landfill, they went into the stream of commerce. Surprisingly, there's actually, you can go to the next slide, I think I have some metrics here. Yeah, 43 million. So rather than go into a landfill, it went into a stream of commerce. Makes sense. But surprisingly, there's actually people that didn't want it because now we were emitting pollution to the air. That's, of course, what the press picked up. Like, oh, EPA's running a plant, and hyperbole here. But there were people out there who were producing dioxin. This is horrible, toxic stuff. Again, dioxins in cigarettes, which is horrible and toxic. This is about making choices again, what's going to be best to be able to bring it back in. It cleaned up. It is in the remedial program. I don't know if Brad's done with it yet.
No, not yet.
Not yet. To deal with a couple other issues on site. We're dealing with the acute issues, the chemicals in the facilities. This ultimately got dismantled. There's nothing there yet. Worked some great deals with companies that come in, take all the scrap and basically sell the facility, because a lot of these distillation columns can be used in a variety of processes and go somewhere else. So rather than have everything scrap and materials on site go into the trash can, it went back into reuse. Kind of odd saying running a chemical facility is a great choice of recycling, right? But does it make sense? Does anyone disagree? I'm open for disagreement. I love arguing, actually.
It's true, he did.
So, again, that's a success story. This is one of the more complicated, great sites that we've had in my recent memory.
Did you mention where much of the liquid waste ended up?
I believe Germany and Mexico.
That's correct, yeah.
But it wasn't dumped, it was used in other plants.
Correct.
To make,
Yes. They
products.
continued processing it and turned it into product.
Now, me, because I'm a realist, and probably already get how I work here, I'm not sure Mexico exactly is the high on the food chain for environmental stewardship. Again, we're making choices.
But
What's the choice?
EPA and the folks running the plant went there and checked out the plant to make sure
Correct.
that we're of a
Correct.
high enough
Marco
quality.
Signor went down with them and did all the translating. They even worked in a couple, what is it, we don't need no stinking badges. They worked that in as far as batches, for how many batches you need to do. So there was a little bit of humor in it also.
When this company walked away from this facility, they literally had chemicals in process in that facility, a lot of it. And they just threw the switch, walked away. EPA was faced with this question: are we going to turn all of that liquid waste that's in an intermediate state, are we going to turn that into a waste stream? And the answer, this happened at a good time, because the administration said, yeah, let's try to find another use for that stuff. And that's how the Germany and Mexico thing came about. And it got all the way up to some big gun, high-powered, well-paid lawyers in Washington, D.C. who had to look at treaties between the United States and Mexico and the United States and Germany to make sure we could do this. And it got done,
Fortunately, they saw
and
the
it was
right way.
And the money that
a
was
very cool success story.
generated was used in the,
I
was
don't know.
reimbursed right here
I
in the.
don't know the exact, I would imagine
I
so.
would imagine it would use.
Very little money was gained from the way it turned out, but the stuff didn't end up in the waste stream. That was the.
Is that plant still operational?
No, it's gone. It's a parking lot right now.
What's the big, there is a big plant of some kind, which is very old, right outside Delaware City on the back road. What is that?
Refinery.
Yeah, it's probably the refinery.
Thank
It
you.
used to be Motiva. Is that? Yeah.
This plant had a number of different names over the years. It was also
Medicam.
known as Medicam, in case that's what you're thinking of. Let's see, we've seen this.
Yeah, it's the same picture, but again, it goes back into bringing it back in after we clean something up, someone else may be able to use it. Next slide. So here's another one that 9/11, everyone thinks you had planes hit, and you had, obviously, unfortunately, it was a horrible day. I remember it vividly. I was on a cleanup site at a plating shop. NPR, some plane hit the World Trade Center. Started watching it. I don't want to relive that. We had this, but what about other things? You can hit the slide again. All the airborne particulates, all the asbestos in the various buildings, the combustion byproducts from the burn, all those things, and many of those things can be hazardous substances that have to be dealt with. Pentagon was the same thing. You had one of our biggest, I was there again as a contractor, and one of our biggest things was do air monitoring and sweeps as they're going through, bringing the debris over into the parking lot. I forget which side it was. Huge parking lot. I remember guys with snipers and saying I can still hit, string and diamond tap because they had to hit cold, but still saying I can hit a penny at 1,000 yards. Really good people, horrible time in the country's history. But we're looking for asbestos to make sure people aren't not only doing it, think about it, not only there, but if it gets on their clothes and bring it home to their families. Doing monitoring to make sure nothing was being released to the environment. Capital anthrax. Okay, so I looked up in here, and 302.4, I don't see anthrax listed as a hazardous substance. EPA definitely did the cleanup. I was in that very office, that's Dashiell's office. I won't say the picture I have of me on his desk in level A with, two-handed salute. How do you think we respond to this? If it's not a hazardous substance and it's not oil, is it like dog food? Is it pollutant or contaminant? That's what it is. That's how we're responding to it. Also can affect, again, immediately dangerous to human health. Yeah, if you have Anthrax, that can be immediately dangerous. That's a problem. A couple other different types of sites. Again, these are a little more off the, not visually enticing, not great news quality stuff. Vapor intrusion. You know, you have a bunch of chemicals, whether it be gas stations, whether it be dry cleaning places that have PCE or there's TCE in the groundwater. Basically, it gets in the groundwater and comes up. Shoe polish, we have furniture wax, we have cosmetics, we have chemicals in our shed or in our garage, all that can mask it, that makes it look like it's coming, but we're living in it from what we brought into our house, what's under our kitchen sinks. Percy, PA, you guys, if you're from around here, you probably know Percy, big vapor intrusion site up there. I was not involved with this one, so to be honest, I can't explain a whole lot. Maybe Charlie can jump in.
Just real quick, this is the Del Bar facility, if anybody knows it. Del Bar was this building here. It was discovered that we had contaminants in the ground that we're getting on, doing a vapor intrusion thing on these 3 houses here, or 3 or 4 properties here. And this is a hillside. This would be the top of the hill. And it looked like Del Bar was the guilty party. And Del Bar took a big hit. The state of Pennsylvania said they were the guilty party. EPA played along with that for a while. And then EPA came to realize that may not be the truth. That stuff may have come from somewhere else. And it turned out it came from up here on the top of the hill, from a facility that was no longer there, but had, in the years past, contaminated soil, and slowly this stuff seeped its way, flowed its way down the hill, in a little bit of a swale here next to Del Bar, and found its way under these houses. And didn't go much farther because then it goes back up the hill. So it was a good lesson for everybody that not always is it the obvious perpetrator, and you have to be very, very careful. Del Bar is no longer in business in that location. I don't know whether they're blaming the environmentalists here or not. I think they actually were happy to be closing their doors.
And then, so here's a couple other, this is, in many cases, these are many of our bread and butter spills that cause contamination. Again, these don't get the big headlines like the oil spills and the big chemical company spills, but mercury spills, I've talked about that. I've been to half dozen of them. Most of them originating from schools. We've had, I remember being down in DC on Mischief Night. I forget what year it was, but the school was on the corner of Malcolm X and, I forget the other street.
Can't help you there.
Yeah, it was not the best part of the neighborhood. We needed police escorts, and basically what it was is kids found a mason jar full of mercury and thought it was like Terminator. So they were throwing it in the school. They brought it on the bus, threw it on the bus, and they brought it home to multiple homes. So there was a dozen homes that had to be, and we had to go out in the middle of the night because there's sizable amounts of mercury. You're contaminating the home. People, especially sensitive populations, younger children, pregnant women, older people, mostly younger children is the big sensitive. Go and do an assessment. Lead contamination, that's everywhere. Hamburg, Pennsylvania has been going on forever. Exide battery, and a lot of places in West Virginia. Battery companies would crush their batteries and use it for fill. People used to take fill for their own yards to level their yards out. So you have not only parts per million, but you have percent lead. Really bad. Plating shops, buried waste, dry cleaners, mom and pop operations love small business, but often they don't have the resources to do something properly, and they can cause just as much trouble. A lot of the cleanups done, East Norriton did a water line because, I believe, even though we never got the silver bullet, because of a dry cleaner. Released, contaminated a bunch of wells and how to get hooked up.
Miles, do you have any other We're down to about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
If you
I'm
have
gonna
something else you want to focus
blast
on,
through to a couple,
tell me when to stop.
keep going. All right, the 6 Ps, you can blast through this. This is the big thing with perception, the challenge we have with actually dealing appropriately with environmental contamination. You can just go through right through all the 6 of them. If you look at all these, this deals with primarily what? People's feelings, people's perception, people's perspective. What's missing, you go to the next one. What's really missing is science from it. And it's a real big challenge for us and for anyone in the cleanup world is to balance someone's, you can go to the next one. Balance this, which is probably, if you notice, they're all in black and white, which really sounds like a current affair expose. There should be some gloom and doom music in the background. But if it's your backyard, it's going to mean something to you, just like it would in my backyard. The challenge is to be able to bring accurate perspective. You can go to the next slide. Next one again. Has anyone heard of NIMBY? Not my backyard. Okay, so everyone wants to be able to throw their trash away. No one wants a trash dump in their backyard. If you had a big factory there that may have been a polluter, if you work there, that's your source of income. But if you didn't work there, that's evil. Trying to balance out what those contamination issues actually are, managing public opinion, bringing perspective without dismissing. The worst thing I can do is go up there and say, it's not a problem, don't worry about it. Sometimes it may not be a problem, but you can't present it that way. So you have to get some facts. So I'll tell you, zinc and copper are both listed hazardous substances. Just take a wild guess. Can anyone guess what this might be? You have acid, you have iodine, you have copper, you have zinc. Take a wild guess. What's that? It's a product.
Batteries.
Oh.
Batteries?
That's a great guess. We're going to click. It's the label of Fred Flintstone's children vitamins. So that's the aha moment I wanted. Thank you very much. You're getting a pencil too. And my point in doing this is not to, again, not to dismiss anything, but to bring perspective. Just so something's there doesn't mean it's bad. You have to look at a lot of different things. You can look at this.
Could you go back to the panesthetic, because I never heard that one before.
To be honest, I'm not even sure what that is. I tried Googling it, and I was like, that just sounds bad. Which again, that goes back, I should have put it in gray. It brings the heartstrings. So if you go to the next slide, read this, and I'm going to be done in 1 minute here, I promise. Sounds really bad, right? Guess what this is a label for? There's no things. I couldn't pull the picture off. Pool chemicals.
I was going to say.
You put your children in a swimming pool that has that chemical in it. Again, perception, perspective. Okay? It can be nasty stuff, but how much you've been exposed to. So these are what you have to actually look at. What's a contaminant? What are the concentrations? What's a route of exposure? Talk about vapor intrusion. Well, if I'm not drinking the water, could I inhale it? Circumstances surrounding. That pool chemical is a 55-gallon drum. If it's sitting in a locked building on a locked property in the pool house, is there any exposure to it? No. What if that was moved and abandoned on a children's playground? Totally different story. Totally different story. That's something we have to remember. Avoid the contamination in the first place. That's the big thing. That's going to solve everything. It's an unachievable goal, but boy, it's a good one to try to have, right? Any questions? That's my presentation. Sorry I ran long and I had blast through. Any questions? Comments? Peanut throwing?
If you didn't get enough, come back or stay here. At 11:15, we're going to focus in on a couple of specific sites, 2 basically, and we're going to go a lot deeper about how you clean up these particular sites. And one of them is a Bucks County site. So
There's another site that you have, you say ChemFab. What are we talking? How about in Wycombe?
we're not going to do ChemFab.
Is that Wycombe? Is ChemFab Wycombe?
I don't recognize Wycombe. Chem-Fab Wolf,
Lycombe was a
Oh,
knitting
Tyco.
mill.
Tyco,
Was a knitting mill which housed the dyes from Cold Spring and Yardley.
oh, no, that's, we're not,
That goes back 40 years.
oh. I'm not
And it's
familiar with that
still
one.
there.
Not familiar with that one,
Yeah, okay.
but it's still there.
WYCOM, yeah. Evidently, they sold all the properties around it to a developer
Let's-
except that
let's-
corner.
Let's break and we'll talk.
Okay,
Let's break.
Linda Bar.
15 minutes, come back